So we did players to buy now last week. So, hey, for every buyer, there's got to be a seller. So this week we're going to talk about players to sell now. Let's get into it, Nate. What is the first sell that you have for us this week?
All right. I've always been a big fan of this guy, and I was excited when he signed his contract so that he would be hitting the open market at a prime age, but he decided to ask for a trade before that even happened. But he still got paid, so it worked out for him, but I don't think it's going to work out quite as well for your fantasy teams, and that's DK Metcalf, now a wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, his value on Keep Trade Cut has gone up since the trade, up 6 spots from wide receiver 29 to wide receiver 23 over the past couple weeks. And I really enjoy looking at the values and how they go up and down on Keep Trade Cut. It's not an exact science. Your league is your league. You always have different valuations within your league. But I like a crowdsourced resource because it kind of gives me an idea of the market, even though I think we can all agree that sometimes Keep Trade Cut is a little wild with some of the rankings they put out there. It's a little reactive, as we could say. But I think people are reacting to the DK Metcalf trade. They see him going to the Steelers. Now, the Steelers don't have a quarterback. So I don't really consider the Steelers an upgrade over the Seahawks, but people are excited to see him go there. You could maybe say the Steelers are a better overall team, but, this might be a little bit of a Ravens fan in me. But the Steelers are the best mediocre team in the NFL right now. They are so good at being, 9-8 and making the wild card, and that's their season. Good job, Mike Tomlin. I mean, it's consistent, at least you'd say. But the Steelers don't have a quarterback right now. I don't think this is an upgrade for DK Metcalf. Also, JSN, obviously a big target getter moving forward. So, he doesn't have that competition to deal with anymore. But he's not going to a Steelers room that's devoid of talent. George Pickens is there, who has had, good seasons over the last 2 years. And while I do think that DK Metcalf is the wide receiver 1 over George Pickens, I don't necessarily think that there's going to be a lot of room between the two of these guys. They're pretty similar players in that they're kind of, alpha outside wide receivers who can be deep threats. It's going to be interesting how they coexist. Neither one of them really thrive on underneath routes, and they don't have anyone on their team right now who fits that kind of mold outside of maybe Calvin Austin. But I mean, even Calvin Austin has, been a deep threat in his short career there with the Steelers. And DK Metcalf also is coming off not a great year last year. He's not, in the prime of his production, at least according to last year, where he was wide receiver 32 on the season, had 66 receptions, 992 yards, and 5 touchdowns. In 2023, he was wide receiver 21. And over the past couple years, Mike, since he finished as wide receiver 7 in 2020, his second year, since that year, he has consistently gone down in fantasy points and fantasy finishes over the past 4 years in a row. So every year he's gotten a little bit worse, a little bit worse, a little bit worse. Even though he's like 27 years old right now, so he is in the prime of his, career. We've seen him slowly descend since he hit his peak in 2020. Now, I don't think DK Metcalf is a bad player at all, but I think with his production over the past couple of years and now going to the Steelers, where it's either going to be Mason Rudolph, Jackson Dart, or who knows, maybe Aaron Rodgers gets there, I'm not that excited about it. And then you throw in the fact that who's their offensive coordinator, Mike?
Arthur Smith.
Arthur Smith, who we love and adore here in the fantasy community.
Well, that's one way to yeah, go on.
He's known for great passing success, correct? Right? Remember
Course.
those days in Atlanta? When Kyle Pitts and Drake London did basically nothing for anybody. We were on here talking about it and we saw it coming, but a lot of people had a lot of hope. And I don't want you to have that same kind of hope for the Steelers offense when they have nobody at quarterback and they got Arthur Smith at offensive coordinator. I'm interested to see how he splits targets between the two of those. But looking at last year's target splits, I mean, there's not a lot of targets to go around in that offense. Let's be honest. They had under 500 targets between the receiving room and running back room. And second most targets on the team was Pat Freiermuth with 78. Their wide receiver 2, Calvin Austin, only had 58. And their wide receiver 3, Van Jefferson, had 42. So there's not a lot to go around. There's really no conceivable way that DK Metcalf is going to see more than 100, maybe at best like 110 targets next year. So there's not a lot of volume there for fantasy success. So I think this is a good time to move off of DK Metcalf. As much as I love the player himself, I don't think the situation is great for fantasy football. So, Mike, some of these costs, some of these trades that I found on Dynasty Daddy that I was excited about with DK Metcalf, there was multiple trades where people are trading DK Metcalf straight up for Jalen Waddle, and I would do that in a heartbeat.
Okay.
Yourself?
I mean,
Getting a little
Waddle's
bit
injuries
younger?
concern me, but I'm getting younger. There's, you know who the quarterback is, Tua, down there, and when Tua's on, he's pretty good. Yeah, I don't hate it.
Also, rumors of Tyreek possibly leaving, which would, obviously
He's
make
he's been a
Jalen
little
Waddle
wishy-washy on that.
much.
He was also supposed to retire after this upcoming season. Now he's not doing that either. So until
Yeah.
I see something happen, I'm just gonna say it's status quo with Tyreek Hill.
Yep. Well, you're gonna like this trade a lot more. DK Metcalf in an early third for Devonta Smith.
Yes, I will do that.
Yeah, and I saw this happen multiple times too.
Yeah.
So I was very excited about this trade. And
Yeah.
then just to give a draft pick, I saw people trade DK Metcalf for the 106. I understand that if you're a competitive team and you really need some wide receiver help, I don't know how I feel about this year's wide receiver class making an immediate impact for your team. But at the 106, you could definitely find yourself a really good running back and possibly some quarterback help. So I like the 106 for DK Metcalf as well. Those are my values. I'm willing to move on from DK Metcalf where I have him if I can get it.
I like it. Before I get to my first player, I do want to say I kind of have a theme here with my guys too. Aging players who are joining new teams. And I think that, there's a lot of hype when guys join a new team. So you can kind of sell these guys at max value. And I do think that closer to the season, their values will increase. By the way, you get into camp, maybe get a game or two. That's kind of what I'm looking at here. So my first player that I'm selling is Las Vegas Raiders quarterback Geno Smith. He's joining a new team that, as of right now, is devoid of receiving options minus Brock Bowers. I mean, is Jacoby Myers the best wide receiver option? We're just going off of what I know right now. If they're lining up to
I
play,
like Myers. He's underrated wide receiver one out there.
I agree with that, but there's better wide receiver ones in the NFL. We know that. This is going to be addressed in the draft or possibly a trade on draft day. Somebody gets cut later in camp, they pick him up, something like that. He's going to turn 35 this season. I know it's not the end all be all for quarterbacks that are a little older, but still, he is aging. And here's the thing about Geno Smith too, Nate, that not a lot of people think about. He throws a lot of picks. He has 4 seasons with double-digit picks, and one of those was over 20 interceptions. He had 21, albeit it was his rookie season. But listen, it still happened. He's also coming off a career high in passing yards with 4,320. There's a selling point there. So, it's one of those things. Can we get younger and upgrade? I do think he's going to be a solid weekly starter, not a guy that's probably going to lose you games, but more likely than not, he's never going to really push you over the top. But a good quarterback 2 or quarterback 3 for a contending team. So what does it cost for a guy like this? Now, some of these trades I didn't like, but I just kind of wanted to see where the values were. Anthony Richardson for Geno Smith and then a 27 third. If that's the case, I'm just keeping Geno Smith.
Yeah, and if I have Anthony Richardson, I'm probably keeping Anthony Richardson too, because I'm just going to gamble on him getting some upside, some more trade value into the season rather than settling for Geno in a third.
Yeah, until he loses his job somehow to Daniel Jones. Geno Smith in the 109 for Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this trade.
I'm okay with that. Yeah. I'd like to get a little something back on the Kyler Murray side.
Yeah, this is one of those classic, I'm giving 2, I'm only getting 1. Give me like a third back, at least so I feel better about it.
Yeah. And here's another one. Devonta Smith getting moved a lot. Geno Smith for Devonta Smith.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy with that. As you saw in my last trades, I was going for Devonta Smith. I think he's a great pickup. He's consistently underrated for the production that he actually puts out. And fantasy community has called up, where he is rated within like the top 15 wide receivers or so. But his production's pretty consistent. So I'm all about going after Devonta anytime I can.
All right, perfect. Nate, do you have another sell for us? I'm sure you do.
I sure do. And if you remember last week when we did the podcast, we talked about buys, and I brought up 2 New York Jet players. I talked about Breece Hall. I talked about Garrett Wilson. I was excited to buy both of them because their value has kind of gone down over the past couple months. Well, there's a player in the Jets whose value has gone up, and that's Justin Fields. Since he's joined the Jets, his value has gone quite up, and I do think that he will perform decently with some upside in fantasy football. I mean, he's got the running ability. We know that. But if you look at last year, it was on a different team, and it was the Steelers. They played a bit more conservatively. But he only surpassed 20 points in 2 of the 6 games that he started. Otherwise, he was just sitting there in the mid-teens low teens even at times. So the production fantasy-wise was really not there last year as it was in the first couple of years that he had with the Bears where he was running all over the place. So part of this becomes, okay, how are the Jets going to use Justin Fields? Are they going to use him the similar way that the Chicago Bears did, let him run all over the place? If he does, he's going to be good for fantasy, obviously. If he's going to be a bit more limited and more conservative, like the Steelers used him, he's not going to be as great for fantasy on a weekly basis. And what we saw when he played with the Steelers, even though it was less productive from a fantasy perspective, they won games with Justin Fields, something they did not do in Chicago when Justin Fields was there. So I think the Jets will try to lean towards how the Steelers use Fields, while of course trying to open up the ground game with his legs a little bit, because that's obviously one of his strengths. So a little bit of this obviously comes down to how the Jets use him. But looking at the Jets, they have a new head coach who is a defensive coach. He's a defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn from Detroit Lions. He was a defensive coordinator over there. I'm never a huge fan of defensive head coaches and how they're going to, deal with a young, less developed quarterback. Now, it's not always that way, but it's usually more fun when you find an offensive coordinator who becomes a head coach, like a Sean McVay, like a Matt LaFleur, those guys, and they become the quarterback guru kind of thing. Kevin O'Connell, their offensive coordinator, also from Detroit. He was the passing game coordinator over there, Tanner Engstrand. And Mike, you're going to love this fact. Tanner, the new offensive coordinator for the Jets, was the offensive coordinator for the DC Defenders in 2020.
Beautiful.
I know.
I do love that. You're right.
It's great. It's great. So we got this guy from the XFL at that time. He was also, I'm just bringing up these fun facts because I was really looking into this, trying to understand what the Jets were bringing to the table with their new coaching staff. Tanner Engstrand also was a graduate assistant at San Diego, not San Diego State, go Toreros. San Diego under Jim Harbaugh. Back in the day before he went to Stanford. San Diego being the alma mater of Josh Johnson and Ross Dwelly. Some names that you guys might remember. But all this to say, we got some new coaching staff in here. They did give Justin Fields 2 years, $40 million, $30 million guaranteed. It always comes down to the guarantees. But these new coaches, they're not going to wait around forever. If Fields not the guy, they're going to move in a different direction next offseason and go get their guy. Because at the end of the day, their job is on the line. If Fields doesn't perform this year, I don't think he's going to get next year's opportunity. They'll cut him, take the $10 million in dead cap, and move on with their lives. This is something that we need to look at in with the Giants as well. What the Giants do, I know this is kind of a anecdotal thing here, but the Giants are in a really interesting situation where they decide to keep their head coach and their GM, who both know if they don't perform this year, they're out. Like they were given like a final warning, like, hey, this is your last chance. And there's all this conversation about them picking Cam Ward. It's really interesting when you set up your guys and you tell them you have this year and that's it, and then they go draft a rookie quarterback. If that rookie quarterback struggles at all,
well,
like we just saw this happen in Chicago with the Bears and Caleb Williams.
But the problem too is they're going to be like, well, hey, Jaden Daniels did it, but not every rookie quarterback is going to be Jaden Daniels. Is the problem? So in a slightly different situation, but the Jets, they got a new coaching staff in there. They want to keep their jobs. If Fields isn't the guy and not performing well, even if he's performing well for fantasy, if they're not winning games, they will go a different direction. And I think that's an important thing to keep in the context of this conversation, because as good as Fields can be for fantasy, we're talking Dynasty Fantasy here. I want a guy that's going to be a future starting quarterback as well. So looking at that contract, about $20 million a year. Average value. Just for some comparison, Sam Darnold going to the Seahawks got 33 average annual value, and Daniel Jones going to the Colts got 14 million annual average value. So technically, Fields average, his market value is closer to Daniel Jones, Mike, than it is to Sam Darnold. All this to say, I think this is the opportunity to move off of Justin Fields. He's been one of the most traded players in sleeper leagues over the past week or two. So I think that if you have Justin Fields and you're not a Justin Fields stan, this is your opportunity to move off of him. His value is pretty high right now. Sure can go up in the season, but it's one of those things. I did it last season with a couple of players. You have a player, he goes up 1 week. If you don't make that trade happen that week and he has a bad game the next week, you're right back down. It is so reactionary in the season. This is your chance. Things are a little bit slower. Things stay a little bit more. Let's look at these trades, Mike, because I think there's some really good trades here if you want to move Justin Fields. Now, this was before the Higgins contract. I have not updated it since the Higgins contract, but I did see a trade just this weekend for Justin Fields in the 306
and you receive T. Higgins in the 204.
I like it. And I like that T. Higgins is staying in Cincy.
Yep. You know what you're going to get with T. Higgins. And Joe Burrow obviously can support the two of them, him and Chase. Another trade, Justin Fields in the 108 for Baker Mayfield in the 110. So a slight downgrade in your first round pick, but you get a more stable quarterback in Baker Mayfield.
Do it.
Yeah. Especially, remember how Baker Mayfield started out last year. He was top 10 quarterback throughout most of the season. I don't have my finishes up in front of me right now, but he might have actually even finished as a top 10 quarterback. He probably did, considering he played the entire season. Some other guys, just to mention real quick in this trade, like the Fields in the 108 for Mayfield in the 110. If you take a slight downgrade at the first round pick, some other quarterbacks that also try to go after, in addition to Baker Mayfield, if you can't go get him, Trevor Lawrence, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, all more stable quarterbacks that I would take over Justin Fields. And I'm okay making that move for the slight downgrade of 2 or 3 picks in the first round near the back half.
Baker Mayfield was the quarterback 4.
Yeah, I was going to say he performed really, really well last year, so he was going to be a top
22.5 fantasy points per game.
Yeah, even with Chris Godwin going down, he looked really good. And Mike Evans even missing a couple games. He had a couple games there with neither one of those guys, and Cade Otton was getting like 12 targets a game. I loved it.
And for the record, Justin Fields, quarterback 32, he averaged 12 fantasy points per game.
Yep. Not super great for the fantasy production. And last trade here, Mike, Justin Fields straight up for our guy Devonta Smith. He's getting traded everywhere.
The guy catches a long bomb in the Super Bowl, and everybody wants to move him. But yeah, I'll take Devonta Smith again.
Obviously,
why not? He's only 26. So
yeah.
Did you have one more point you wanted here?
Oh yeah, I was on the next page, so I almost missed it. But talking about moving Justin Fields for a first round pick, because I saw some picks moving around for him. I don't know if I would trade him for a random 2026 first. If you have a 26 first out there, someone's offering you feel really good about it being in the top half, absolutely take that without a doubt. But I think with a random like late 26 first, to have to wait on that, unless you have a ton of quarterback depth, I would need at least like the 110, 108 to move Justin Fields, just because as much as I want to take an advantage of the sell window here with Justin Fields, I'm not going to sell him for cheap, because there is an opportunity for him to be productive in fantasy football. There's an opportunity for him to raise his value. The Jets could draft a wide receiver at the end of next month, and all of a sudden, boom, Justin Fields moves up 3 positions in the quarterback rankings, and then you can sell there for a couple more spots. There's a lot that can happen between now and the season, and then once we get into the season. So I do want to, make sure you're holding your ground when you are selling these players.
My next sell is the new Seattle Seahawks wide receiver Cooper Kupp, who's going to be 32 when the 2025 season kicks off. Not only is he going to be 32, they gave him a pretty sizable contract. I believe it's averaging about $15 million a year over the next 3 years. That is a lot of faith to put into Cooper Kupp. Fire up JSN, man. He's going to be great out there with Sam Darnold. Cooper Kupp lining up across from him. Cooper Kupp, I think, is his main thing is going to be taking coverage off of JSN. If I could be honest with you. But some interesting facts about Cooper Kupp. Did you know that he's only played 2 full seasons in his career?
Yeah, you talk about injury-prone players. Cooper Kupp is certainly, quote-unquote, injury-prone.
Yeah, and that was in 2019 and 2021. Those 2 seasons are the only 2 that he eclipsed the 1,000-yard receiving mark, which is a benchmark that we do judge wide receivers by. He did have 974 yards in 2020. That was in 15 games. These stats do not include playoffs. If you look at PFF, it has a couple seasons over that. PFF, they put their playoff stats in there as well. It's going to have a new team in offense, again, where JSN looks to be the number 1 wide receiver. And in 2024, he had his lowest yards after the catch and yak rec of his career. So his yards after the catch for the season was 278, and his yak rec was only 3.8. With his age, new team, new offense, new quarterback, I think now is the time to flip him, try to get a little bit younger. I do still think that if he's healthy, he could be a wide receiver too, but we don't really know. He's also going to be 32. He's slowing down a little bit. You saw it on the field last year. But hey, if you won the championship with him, you want to retool, a little partial rebuild, he's a guy that I think could definitely help you out by moving him. Was it cost to move him, you ask? I'm glad you asked. A 27 first. It's another year away, but you never know what that 27 first could be. It could be the 101.
2 years away, you really don't know. You think it's like, oh, this is a good team. It's probably like a late first. Okay, sure. And this is going back to something I preached all last offseason and something I'll continue to preach every offseason. Whenever you are trading for future firsts, you always value it at like the 110, the 112. I mean, if you can value it at the 112, I mean, obviously you got to, takes two to tango, so you got to get them to value it somewhere similar. But I always try to value future first, especially 2 years out, like the 112, because then if it gets any better than that, I've done really well for myself. It's only up from there.
I agree. I like that. Cooper Kupp and a 25 third for the 201.
Yeah. I think, this comes down to
Depends on where that third is. It didn't tell me.
that's true, but also like positionally, like, do you need a running back? That's a good trade to make.
Yeah, the 201 is going to be a great spot for a running back.
Yeah, I don't have to pick him up the 201, but I'm gonna be picking up Devin Neal everywhere at the 201.
For sure. And I put this one on here just for you. Derrick Henry and Cooper Kupp. So you're moving two aging assets for the 101 for Ashton Genty.
I don't know who made this trade. Dumb trade. I'll take the 101 all day.
Someone did it. I don't know. Thank you, Fantasy Calc, for letting me search your database for these trades. That's where I sourced mine. Nate's, I believe, came from Dynasty Daddy, I'm sure,
Yep.
right? Okay.
Yep.
Very good. Nate, you have another player for us to sell?
I do. One more player from me, and that is Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver for the 49ers. Deebo Samuel just left. He went to Washington, is now a Commander. And you're hearing rumors about Brandon Ayuk possibly being traded. He's coming off the injury as well. Look, Brandon Ayuk's not going anywhere. They just signed him to a long contract. He's coming off the injury. His value is low in a trade market anyway. They don't really have wide receivers outside of him, Ricky Pearsall to be included, I guess. But Brandon Ayuk is there for the future. So he's going to be there. But one thing I've been paying attention to is the 49ers. If you've been watching them, they've lost a lot of free agents. They've traded off, Deebo Samuel. They're kind of delaying their contract with Brock Purdy. They're not necessarily looking at 2025 as maybe one of those window years, which is interesting because you got CMC, and so you always have a chance, and you don't want to waste him as he's getting a little bit older. But their team is certainly going to regress this year.
Oh, yeah.
So they're going to regress a little bit. I'm thinking that they're going to go ahead and draft some more competition into that wide receiver room as well. And take that with a grain of salt because I know Ricky Pearsall was a pretty high pick last year. So it's not like, you draft a fourth round wide receiver and all of a sudden Ricky Pearsall's job is on the line. But remember, Jawan Jennings had a really good year last year. Brandon Ayuk will be coming back. George Kittle, of course, is there. And when Deebo Samuel's out, George Kittle goes off. CMC's back. I don't think there's a lot of opportunity in this year for Ricky Pearsall. And I think with the things that have been going on with the 49ers team around the wide receiver room and the weapons there, I think his value has gone up. And I think this is another sell window. Nothing against Ricky Pearsall. I think I might have been actually the highest on Ricky Pearsall coming out of the draft at the Dynasty Rewind. I was pretty excited about him. I don't think most of the other crew was as excited about Ricky Pearsall. But nothing against him, but I think he's a little overvalued right now. Looking at his stats from last year, he played in 11 games. He was shot. So good for him to come back and put up these stats. Pretty impressive. 11 games, 31 receptions, 400 yards, and 3 touchdowns. If you wanted to extrapolate that out to a 17-game season, he would have broken 500 yards, which is something that we do look for rookie wide receivers to break 500 yards. Usually means, they're going to be at least decent. So I think Ricky Pearsall will be good, but the 49ers and the Shanahan system is a offensive system that relies on wide receivers to create yards after the catch. You heard it 2 years ago when Brock Purdy was in the MVP conversation until they got absolutely destroyed around Christmas by the Ravens. But until that point, Brock Purdy was in the MVP conversation and people were going back and forth. Well, is it Brock Purdy or is it the weapons around him, what they do after the catch? Well, Ricky Pearsall has not really done much after the catch, at least so far in his 1 year in the NFL. He only averaged 3.5 yak rec last year, Mike. What was Cooper Kupp's? You say 3.8? I mean, come on. If you can't have more yak rec than Cooper Kupp, maybe you're not going to be the next big guy for the 49ers. That's something I'm going to mention. And also, I know he's not a rookie anymore, but we still should take age into account. He was a very old rookie. He will be 25 years old before the season starts. So even though you're talking, hey, I'm going to get this guy who's going into his second year, he's already going to be 25 when the season starts this year. So something to keep in mind as well. I don't think Ricky Pearsall is bad, but at the ranking of him fitting into a top wide receiver 3 on your fantasy team, currently at wide receiver 33 last time I checked on Keep Trade Cut, I think he's a good sell right now. So some of these trades I pulled up, Ricky Pearsall and a 3rd-round pick for Dak Prescott.
Yeah, I'll do that.
If you need a quarterback, I think that's a great trade to make.
I agree.
Ricky Pearsall for the 111.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a good range where some of these wide receivers might fall that you like, or a running back, and anyone that you draft in this spot is likely younger than Ricky Pearsall. So
Much likely, yeah. And, even though Ricky Pearsall did have really good draft capital, I don't think he was being picked up in the 1st round in a lot of drafts. I think he was more of a 2nd rounder. So you've already made your money.
Yeah.
You've made your profit there. Gosh, man, I may be able to pick up Luther Burden at the 111 with how he's kind of fallen in some mock drafts here recently. So I'd be really happy with that.
Yeah, give me Luther Burden. There's another guy too. Alec Aomanor, who's going to be a great. He's not going to be the 111, but I was watching him. Whoo, liked what I saw.
Yeah. We'll be talking about him a little bit later.
Yeah, so if you want to hear us talking about him, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind, putting the bonus pods out. We're recording 2 of them tonight. So
yeah,
get in there.
Get in there. All right. And then straight up, these guys are ranked higher than him on Keep Trade Cut, but I saw multiple trades where he was going straight up for these guys, Khalil Shakir and or Zay Flowers. Both guys who I think are upgrades over Ricky Pearsall for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm a big Khalil Shakir guy.
Yep.
I'm a big Zay Flowers fan too, so I'll take either of those guys.
Yep. And then the last one I had here, which I thought was kind of stealing, but somebody traded Ricky Pearsall in the 212 for Bucky Irving. So, go see what you can do.
Yeah, I mean, I'd also, on the flip side, if you need a wideout and you're good at running back, or you have a lot of picks and you're planning on drafting a running back, I actually like both sides of the trade. Like if you're a big Ricky Pearsall fan and you were never able to get him, you give up. And look, we know Bucky Irving appears to be the guy in Tampa Bay, but Rashad White's still there.
Sean Tucker still there as well.
Yeah, he's still alive. Yeah, I actually think, depending on how your team looks, this is a good trade for both sides as long as everybody's happy with it. Let's talk about new Washington Commanders wide receiver Deebo Samuel. We're still chasing his 2021 season. That is the reality. We saw what he could do. He hasn't done it, and it'll be like 4 years now since that season. In that 2021 season, 16 games played, 77 receptions, 1,405 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns, just good, just on his receiving stats alone. But then he added 59 carries for 365 yards and 8 touchdowns. Since that time, though, Nate, he's averaged 14 games a season, 57 catches for 731 yards and 4 touchdowns, 40 carries for 198 yards and 3 touchdowns. So you can see there's been a significant drop-off. I took it. In case you don't know how averages work, I added everything up. You add and then you divide by the number of years. So don't come at me. It's just the math. And if it's 0.5 or above, you round up. Okay. So if you come up with something different, feel free to leave a comment. He's also never played a full season in his career. 15 games, 7, 16. The 16 is when they were already in 17-game seasons, everyone. 13, 15, 15. And I think the important question really is, how will Washington utilize him? He's going to a Cliff Kingsbury offense. It could be good. It could be bad. We don't know. He has expressed in the past that he doesn't want to be a ball carrier as much. So he wants to just be a wide receiver predominantly. Okay, interesting. Here's the thing. He's not as good of a wide receiver anymore. In 2024, his target separation was 1.68 yards, which was 34th in the NFL, and only a 28.6% contested catch percentage. Talk much? No, that was 85th in the NFL. 85th. He does, however, have a decent career yak rec, 9.5, on a career average depth of target of 6.7. So, when he's given good routes that utilize him well, he can be effective. Does not have a ton of drops either. You do have to think of some positives when you want to sell a player, right? 2 years in double-digit drops. He had 10 in 2019 and 12 in 2021. The 12 in 2021, you can almost forgive it because he got so many targets that it's just, you're going to drop some. His wide receiver, but here's the thing, production has been tailing. Wide receiver 3 in 2021 when he had 21.2 fantasy points per game. Wide receiver 38 in 2022, 13 fantasy points per game. Wide receiver 15 in 2023, bumping back up, 15.2 fantasy points per game. Wide receiver 44 in 2024, 10.2 fantasy points per game. Kind of all over the board. I think at best he's going to push to be a wide receiver too. I'm also not 100% certain on that.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really interesting. New team, aging player, really good, impressive quarterback going into his second year. But this was also a quarterback that, he's never had to deal with a player who's had Deebo's personality. We've seen him getting altercations on the sideline. He says a lot in the media. I don't know how it's going to work. Jaden Daniels, to me, looks like a guy who doesn't want to deal with that crap.
I don't know, man. He had Malik Neighbors at LSU. Not that Malik Neighbors is, having any off the field issues, but he does. Malik Neighbors has that wide receiver alpha personality, it seems.
I feel like dealing with that crap in college and the pros is just different.
It is a little bit different.
That's just what it feels like to me.
Also, I caution people with Jaden Daniels. I love Jaden Daniels. I think he's great. I think he's going to have a very long, very fantasy productive career. But we just watched CJ Stroud have the sophomore slump.
Yes.
It's going to happen for Daniels too. There's no way he can just continue to build off of what he just did his rookie year. There's going to have to be some kind of regression, even though they're building more things around him. The offense might continue to be really good, but there's got to be some kind of regression there, I would imagine. I mean, if it doesn't regress, then congratulations, Jaden Daniels, on your Hall of Fame career you're about to continue on.
I guess we're going to see. Yeah. So if you're selling Deebo, Nate, here's what you can get. Deebo for the 106.
Yeah. I think this is a good deal. It's a really weird thing with this year's draft class, and I think I have to say this kind of every time. When you're trading a wide receiver for a first-round pick, just know that you might not be getting wide receiver production back with that pick. If you're looking for a quarterback or a wide receiver, heck, even a tight end, possibly just tight end premium, I think you're making a good deal here. If you're looking for, hey, I'm going to pick up someone at that 106 who's going to give me 1,000 yards in their rookie year, I don't know if we're going to see that from this wide receiver class as quickly as we have from the last couple.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to quantify it, if you will. Deebo, and this trade really happened, so don't come at me. Deebo for the 201, 206, 301, and 401 all this year.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think this is kind of good either way, to be honest.
I mean, 4 picks. One of them is almost the first-round pick.
I mean, I definitely prefer the package. I don't need the 4th-round pick. That's just a little bit extra cherry on the top. But yeah, give me 2 seconds for Deebo. I think that's pretty good when you add the 3rd and the 4th one.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially at the 301 and the 401.
Yeah. And one last one, Deebo for Sam Darnold.
Sorry, I did the thing that people commented on the YouTube before about not liking I do. I'm sorry. I'm trying to work on that. If you're still watching about 40 minutes into the YouTube, I am working on it. I'm trying to do it less, okay? But yeah, I'm good with Deebo for Darnold. I think this can kind of go either way as well, depending on what you need.
All right, Nate doing a little self-scouting on the Dynasty Rewind. So that's all we got for you today. If you want some merch, like cool hat, go ahead and hit the link below. Visit our store, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. If you want to check out all of our premium stuff on there. And hey, look, there's other ways to support us for absolutely free. Follow us on Spotify. Go ahead, follow us on YouTube. All that supports us, and it does not cost you a dime. So until next time, everybody, for Nate, I'm Mike. Thank you for listening.